First of all, well, my name is Michael Carter, and for lack of a better term, I'm the director of the History Club. And it's nice to see my beautiful wife, Paulette, here, and my brother, Steve, and my cousins. And thanks to the American Legion, who's been filming these for a long time. And the wait staff, Brooke and Amy, and others are helping too. Please be generous with them. And Dave is our cameraman. We have our own cameraman. He's great. He's got a young lady helping him. A very professional group, Catch TV. It's nice that they do this because we get a chance to put all these on YouTube a few days after the program. And you know, a lot of people can't attend these because they're not all old like we are, and they have real jobs or they live out of state. And a lot of people watch these and tell me, you know, that they see our programs, you know, a long ways away. Transplanted Bloomingtonians. You know, we are preserving local history here, and my hope is that people will be able to see these presentations long after we've passed away. How about now? So these programs on YouTube, we've now got almost 90, which is incredible. We've been doing it for 10 years now. So if anybody wants to watch any of these ones you haven't seen before, just go to YouTube and their search engine and type in Monroe County History Club, and they'll pop right out. We also work closely with other local history-minded organizations. The support we give each other is very important. So there's Monroe County History Center, and I'm glad to say I've been on the board of directors for a couple of years. I'm proud of that. They give us a lot of help. The Monroe County Public Library is a great place. IU Photo Archives, Brad Cook's here today from Photo Archives. Catch TV, of course, and others. Now, we've got a lot of new attendees, I think. So how many people haven't been here before? Quite a few. If you want to get on our emailing list, just stop by and write your email addresses down. Give it to me, and I'll give it to my buddy George Carpenter, who can't be here today. He'll make sure you get on the email list. Also today, Justin Robinson from the Monroe County History Center will be selling some books over here from their bookstore. The director, Daniel Slagle, couldn't make it today. He's off whitewater rafting somewhere, West Virginia. Also, somebody wants to say a word or two. A young lady named Kaylee. This is Hilltop's 75th anniversary. And she wants to say a few words about that. Kaylee? Oh, there she is.
Thanks so much. My name's Kaylee, and I manage Hilltop Garden and Nature Center. Are there any former Hilltoppers in the room? Yay, I see some hands. Any parents of Hilltoppers? Maybe? So Hilltop Garden and Nature Center is a 5-acre public garden that has been here for 75 years now. The mission is to be a place for people to learn about gardening and connect with nature. We're having a 75th anniversary event that's free and open to the public. There'll be some cool historic stuff, some historic memorabilia, historic photos. If you are a former Hilltopper or a parent of a former Hilltopper and have some special Hilltop memories that you'd like to share, we'll be collecting those as well. So I'm going to leave some flyers here, and if you have any questions, feel free to give Hilltop an email or call. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kaylee. Here's a short rundown of our coming attractions, and we're scheduled, well, all the way up possibly to September of next year. So that's a lot of programs. We'll see what happens. Next month, October 31st, Rod Spa will give a program on Bloomington's Feltus family. A lot of people may not know about the Feltus family, but it's a very prominent family in Bloomington. The title of his program is Bloomington's Feltus Family, Printers, Politicians, Actors, and Circus Talk. An old Bloomington family with a very interesting past. November 28th, Duncan Campbell, who's also given several other programs, will give a program called The Indiana Barn in Transition. January 2nd, 2024, Rosie Gerstmann will give a program on the history of Smithville called Smithville, Indians, Pioneers, Ski-Bows, and Lake Monroe. This presentation will introduce you to family names and individuals that helped that area of Monroe County flourish and to introduce education and sports. January 30th, 2024, Dr. John Butler, another multiple presenter, will give a program called Depots, Platforms, and Flag Stops, a history of railroad places in Monroe County. February 27th, Jill Vance will give a program called To Build a Reservoir, the Origin of Monroe Lake. March 26th, Nan Brewer will give a history called the History of IU School of Fine Arts and Museums Collections. Nan has been with the museum for many years. April 30th, Christine Friesel, who's also many presentations, has a program called Who's Your Character? A Digital Map of the 19th Century. So I'm curious about that. May 28th, Roger Robinson, MD, will give a program called the State Championship Teams from Monroe County High Schools from the years 1904 to 2014. June 25th, Kurt Sylvester, who happens to be the state president of the Indiana Genealogical Society, will give a program on some of the early settler families of Monroe County, who they were and what they brought to this county. Just to show me he knows what he's doing, he found out that he and I were related like third cousins or something like that, so he knows about genealogy. July 30th, we're going to have a history of the Cats TV. It's their 50th anniversary, so they're going to give a program on themselves. August 27th is open for now, but probably not for long. And September 24th, to make things fair, we're looking for somebody to give a program on University High School, the history of UHS. Speaking of Bloomington High School, we had a get-together last night at the lake. It's class of 1964, so this is our 59th get-together. So how many from that class of 64 are here? How's that for support? Now, how many from BHS altogether? How many BHS graduates? Yeah, that's what I figured. That's great. Yeah, how many university people are there? Might be a few. Hey, there's one.
What is a unity?
Does everybody know that song? I'm not going to sing it. Now today's program. We have done a lot of programs, but this one's been on our minds for a long time. It's a story of the old, the original, and the only Bloomington High School. Hard to believe that even the youngest folks who attended that school are now in their 70s. So it's nice that we preserve the history now while we're able. I'm sure a lot of young people around town know virtually nothing of the old school. Of course, the history of that campus goes back way farther than our time there. We're fortunate to have a fellow classmate tell us all about this. Like me, Dr. Clay Stuckey is a 1964 graduate of our high school. He decided to tackle this project, and I'm very glad. I believe, and I just counted the other day, this is Clay's 12th presentation, so there's a reason for that, because he's really good. So Clay, lay it on him.
Thank you, Mike. Today we're going to explore a piece of land here in Bloomington. A piece of land that for about 60 years was the original home of Indiana University, and then for almost 70 years was the site of Bloomington High School. What we're not going to do is talk about the most important part of any school, and that is the teachers and the taught. No, this is a bricks and mortar show that only is going to talk about the buildings and where they were and what uses that they were put to. Now, if you go down to the southwest corner of Walnut and 2nd Street, you'll find Seminary Park, which was established in 1975. Unless, of course, It was established in 1974. Now, if you look around the park, and we're going to do that in a couple of minutes, but if you look around the park, you will find absolutely no signage that would give you any indication that this had ever been the site of Bloomington High School. The only circumstantial evidence, so to speak, is on the corner where you see those two monumental posts. Now, when I took this in 2015, there was shrubbery around them. Now there's no shrubbery. But they're still there. And if you look closely at them, you will see that they were made by the BHS Stone Department and presented by the senior class of 1926. Well, before we take our stroll around the park, let's check out 2nd Street. And here we are looking northeast, and note the two filling stations that are on the corner there in 1932. And if we turn our camera to the left, we were probably on top of the new high school, or at least the upper floors, when this picture was taken. And a lot of you, immediately your eyes zoomed in on the brand new courthouse in the far distance. But growing up on the farm, I zoomed in on the outhouse behind that. You notice that fine old frame home had to give way to a service station a little later. Anyway, to the left there behind the trees and hard to see is one of the two Adams houses. They were already there when the high school was built. There were two of them, and for many years, one of them was the office of the Monroe County School Corporation. Well, now we'll take our stroll around the park. And the first thing we're going to encounter is this monumental, ornamental wall and arch. That was a picture in 1915. And you notice those blank rectangular places on the wall. Originally, each one of those had a picture and information that described the whole history of what I'm going to tell you today. But vandals have destroyed them all. But there's more. I took this picture recently. Now the vandals are hard at work destroying the wall itself.
There is a red Ford Escape parked right in front of the front door that's a fire hazard that needs to be moved. Whoever has a red Ford Escape.
So never underestimate the work ethic of a vandal. Now, if we walk a little further, you'll find a historical marker. Now, the back side of it, don't worry about it, because I'm going to give you that information later in another form. The front side's important, and forgive me for reading, but I want you all to know what it says. It was the State Seminary of Indiana. Congress, which asserted that education was necessary for representative government, granted Indiana one township of land to support a seminary as part of its admission to statehood in 1816. In 1820, Governor Jonathan Jennings approved the act creating the state seminary. When classes first began here, April 4th, 1825, only ancient Greek and Latin were taught. Now I want you to remember April 4th, 1825. If you walk a little bit to the south of that historical marker, there's another one. And when we get up close enough to actually read it, we find that this tablet marks the center of the first building of Indiana University. Classes were first held here on May 1st, 1824. Remember that? You would think the university would know when they first held their classes, but they don't, because several fires early on destroyed original records, so they simply don't know. But an historian here a few years ago did the research, and he has come to the opinion that 1825 wins out. Well, here we have a picture of President Bryan of Indiana University in 1922 is getting ready to turn the dirt where that historical marker is going to be placed. And remember now, we'll allude to it several times, where that marker is now in Seminary Park does not commemorate the original location of the first building at IU. That's over in the Kroger parking lot. Because when they extended college south, tore down the gymnasium, they had to move the marker. But there's no indication that that's not accurate anymore. No sign tells you that it's incorrect. Here we are in 1929 when a bunch of people got out for some reason, and some of them are in period costumes from the 1820s, and we're having some kind of a ring-dang-do there. And I want you to notice that the photographer has been able to back up to get everybody in the picture on a piece of flat land where naturally a building would have been built on flat land. You remember that here for a minute. Now, being an amateur limestone historian, I can't let it go by without pointing out that that building in the back is the Bowman King Stone Company mill, later the Bowman Mill of the Indiana Limestone Company. And sure enough, there was a limestone mill in the immediate block just west of the high school campus. Well, here we have a picture, 1949, with now the former president, William Lowe Bryan, is pointing out that marker to what I suspect is an incredibly bored little boy. Now, it would seem the obvious thing to get a picture that actually shows the marker and the wording on it, but stop and think. The photographer can no longer see it from that position, because if he did, he would back off into the woods, the trees, the shrubbery, and he'd fall down the hill, because the bulldozers have excavated a great piece of land so that you can't photograph it from that side. And here we have a picture from the 1958 Gothic, and for those of you who don't know, the Gothic, it was the yearbook of Bloomington High School, that shows in the background that marker. And we can conclude from it that it's facing probably a little southeast. Not a lot, but the agriculture building there, you can see how that pinpoints why we know that, because we're looking due east, or looking due west at that lower photograph, and you can see it up there. Then there's here. Down here is the university campus and those university outlots. Those are the lots that when they're sold, the money goes to the university. Now, this was what you would get on the backside of that historical marker. You know, in 1820, the Indiana Seminary was chartered by the legislature. In 1825, the Indiana Seminary opened. In 1828, the Indiana Seminary became Indiana College. And then in 1838, Indiana College became Indiana University. Now, the piece of ground that we're going to be talking about today is outlined by 2nd Street on the top, Walnut Street on the right or east, 1st Street on the south or bottom, and on the left, originally it was Railroad Street, then it became Morton Street, and certainly the railroad itself, which abutted right up to the campus. Now, the first buildings were built in 1824, and there was the seminary building, and down in the lower southwest was the professor's house. And there you see the seminary building. Not a huge building, 2 stories, roughly 3 rooms on each floor. And then in 1836, the first college building was built. And then the old boarding house in 1838, which was attached to the professor's house. and then the laboratory building in 1840. I don't know if I skipped the seminary building there in 1824 or 25, I don't know, but you can see it. Now, Seminary Park, as it exists today, encompasses that amount of land on this city block. Now, the first college building, a rather substantial building, as you can see, well, it burned in 1854 for reasons they do not know. Then the second college building, which was built in 1855, just south of the circle, became what we know and all remember as the seminary building. Now, before you start, after you look at that picture, start questioning my memory or your own memories, let's jump ahead chronologically, and I want to explain to you that that was the seminary building, even though it wasn't called that originally, but we're going to call it from now on. That's the seminary building we remember. And this picture was taken about 1891, and the bottom two floors became the seminary building that we remember because in 1900, a fire destroyed the upper floor, and it was rebuilt. We'll discuss this later. And then in 1935, it was decided that the third floor was unsafe, so it was removed. So what we all remember as the seminary building is that lower picture, which went from being a beautiful Victorian mid-19th century building into a rather dull, ugly, flat-roofed building that we went to high school, partly in. So let's go back now to our chronology that's going on. That second college building in 1855, our seminary building, the laboratory building was destroyed up there. Then in 1864, all the remaining structures on the campus were raised except for that old seminary building. So after 1864, the second college building, our seminary building, was the only building on campus. And there we see it. And the thing I like about that picture, notice the wooden sidewalk in a rather poor condition, but we're going to see some of that later. I have no idea who Mr. James Van Hook is, but it was such a nice picture, I just couldn't help giving him a shot in the picture here. And you see, in addition to having the bell tower, you can't have a school without a bell tower, but the bay window that was originally on the building. And here we have, in 1876, now this is an important picture. This shows President Joseph Swain standing behind on the south side of the seminary building. And why it's important is, you see those two wooden shacks there. When I say that that was the only building on the IU campus, well, it was the only substantial building. There had to be wooden shacks, either storerooms or maintenance facilities or something on the order of those two little shacks as you see there. But they don't show up in the records, and they certainly don't show up in other photographs or on Sanborn fire insurance maps. Now, in 1873, the Science Building was built, and it obviously was a very impressive building. And notice the trees had just been planted there in 1873, and by 1876, the trees are much larger. Now, on the top floor of the Science Building was a natural history museum. Now, in 1876, the Centennial exhibit was going on in Philadelphia, celebrating the 100th anniversary of our country, and places were requested to send exhibits, and of course we sent our some of our natural history museum there as an exhibit. But we also sent, for reasons I have no idea, an album of photographs. Now, why anyone in Philadelphia would want to see an album of photographs of what I'm going to show you, it's beyond my comprehension. For example, who in Philadelphia wants to see the law school sitting in the science building and they can't even keep their hats off the floor? Well, here we are. We have a chemical laboratory in the science building. These are all pictures from that album. A balance room. Now, bear one thing in mind. The only theory that I can come up with why we would want to send this album of pictures is that 1876 is the same year that General Custer came a cropper at the Little Bighorn. And I can't help but thinking maybe the faculty wanted folks back east to know that Bloomington, Indiana was not in the Wild West, that it was a civilized country with a university and classrooms and taught sophisticated things. I don't know. It's just my idea. Students at work in the library, part of the chemical lecture room in the science building, the Department of Physics. I looked closely, and I can assure you that E equals MC squared does not appear anywhere on the blackboard. But notice it's Indiana State University, they call it. And they teach a lot of things. Department of Mathematics, course instruction, geometry, trigonometry, surveying, navigation, analytical geometry, differential and integral calculus. I call this picture the thinker. Well, that's part of the physics department in the science building. And then there was also this picture. But what intrigues me about that is it's the same room. Notice the right side of the picture, those steps and chairs on the steps. That's the same room. If you look at the left of the picture, you see those same props propping up the chalk holders along the bottom of the blackboard. But all the writing on the blackboard is different, and the furniture is different, and the thinker only appears in one of them. But why do we need two pictures of the same room? Well, the science building was struck by lightning in 1873 and completely burned to the ground. Now, my question has always been, why was the science building without light rods? But that's just a question. Maybe it had lightning rods and they didn't work. I don't know. So after the science building burned in 1883, IU was back to just one building. And at that point, the university trustees decided, to hell with it, enough of that. Let's move from where we had been to Dunn Woods on the east side of town and start our university up over there. And the first classes began there in 1885. Not only was there more room, but they didn't have the railroad tracks going right by the campus buildings, which probably was a major distraction. So anyway, we're back where the science building, after it burned, IU moving its campus, but still occasionally performed sometimes graduation ceremonies or other things. Classes did go on in the old seminary building. So that's the last time we're going to mention IU. Now we're going to concentrate on the high school. Well, before 1863, schools in Bloomington were mostly private academies, conducted in churches or private homes, and were ungraded. In other words, you didn't have 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, no, didn't have grades. Well, at some early date, Center School was built, and maybe at one time briefly worked as a high school, because President Bryan claimed in a speech one time that he went to high school in this building we're going to see. And later it became a school for colored children. Now, on the corner of 7th and College, where the old Masonic Temple is located, at that corner was one of the more famous of those private academies, and President Bryan also attended this. And notice the sidewalk. Well, there's the building. It was built about 1825, and here we see it in 1924 when it's being raised in order to build the Masonic Temple there. Now, the colored school was over on the corner of 6th and Washington, and there's a picture of it. And that lasted up until they tore it down to build the Carnegie Library, which opened in 1918. Here in about 1891, looking east at the east side of the square, you can see in the distance that school, the center school, the colored school. And here we are taking it down in order to build the library. Well, in 1869, the Indiana legislature passing a law mandating the education of colored children. And from its beginning, the high school was always integrated. But grade schools were always segregated. Go figure. Up until 1951, the grade schools were segregated. Even the high school, though it had been integrated. Anyway, when Center School was torn down, Banneker School was built for the colored elementary students just north of 3rd Street and just west of Rogers Street. Now, if you go down to 3rd Street and College Avenue for the community center, we're looking southwest, and then there's the courtyard right just south of the community center. Well, that parking lot for the Courtyard Motel is down below there in the pink building that's the City High School. The first graded high school in Bloomington was started about 1873 or 73, 69, yeah. It was started in 1863 in the old Tannery building. So that building was located down below where the City High School is labeled. And then in 1873 or 75, they tore that down, and the first purpose-built high school in the city was built. And there you see it on the Sanborn map of 1887, where the old Tannery building had been. Now we have got a brand new high school. And it was called the Central School. So obviously it's confusing. The Center School was the colored school, and the Central School is the new high school. And there it is. Don't know who the architect was, but if you'll recall, when Duncan Campbell gave us the wonderful talk about the Nichols family as an architectural firm here in Bloomington, I don't think Mr. Nichols Sr. had anything to do with designing this, but he had the carpentry contract. That was Hiram Jack Nichols, a local builder. Well, he was the first of what became the Nichols architectural firm. Now, in 1885, that picture was taken by Theophilus Adam Wiley from the top of the Wiley House, looking northwest, and we see the Central School. And here it is in 1907, after fire escapes have been added, where it's now being used strictly as an elementary school. And here are some pictures in 1952 inside the Central School. It was torn down shortly after in about 1953. That slide was labeled nap time. Well, here back to Theophilus Wiley, who turned his camera to the southwest and took this picture of the seminary building in the upper left there. And that diagonal street there is 2nd Street, or what was often referred to at the time as the Vincennes Road. And it's unfortunate that in taking the two pictures, Wiley didn't overlap them so that we could make a panoramic. So obviously stuff is missing between the two pictures. But there's Central School looking north, west, seminary building looking southwest. Well, in 1897, the high school board bought the old seminary building from the university and began holding classes there. And the old Central School became exclusively a grade school, and our newly acquired building here became the high school. After it burned in 1900, we'll look at that in a minute here. That shows the, one of those Dudwell's 1876 pictures from the Centennial shows the inside of the seminary building. And that said it was the chapel and center room on the 2nd floor. There he was as a band room in 1952. Notice those are the same poles and floor joists. I forgot to tell you to look at those, so I will. See the poles and the ceiling joists up there? Same thing. And here's the 1900 fire that wiped out the 3rd floor and did significant damage to the 2nd floor, obviously. That's the same room that we just saw. Now, I have always wondered why the whole building didn't burn. And at the same time, in 1900, Wiley Hall had a fire on the campus, but the top floor of it was saved, and the reason why was because of the fire equipment. That was Bloomington's pumper, steam pumper. Well, that no doubt was why they could save the seminary building. But remember when the science building burned back in 1883, and it burned to the ground? Well, it turned out we already had, it was brand new, this city pumper for the fire department. But the records indicate that the science building was lost due to a lack of water, not the ability to have a fire truck to fight the fire, just not enough water. Well, that picture of that assembly room in the seminary building shows up in the 1909 Gothic. And my conclusion in looking at that picture is that students were much thinner back in 1909. Well, here's some pretty pictures. I love that old seminary building. Well, the new high school is the reason why you all came. Its architect was Mahurin and Mahurin of Fort Wayne. It was built for 600 students, although 400 matriculated when it opened in 1914. The auditorium seated about 1,000, the gymnasium about 400 to 500, and it had 50 to 60 rooms. Now, we had a wonderful talk by David Nord about the Monroe County and Bloomington maps. And we all know you can get a lot of information from maps, especially the Sanborn fire insurance maps. But every once in a while, they'll give you a bum steer. And here, the addition of the Sanborn map came out in 1913, and we know the high school wasn't built till 1914, yet there it appears down at the bottom. But they got its location wrong. Notice how much far forward north the high school building is from the seminary building. When they got it right back in 1927, lined up even with the seminary building. My conclusion is that probably the Sanborn folks knew the high school was going to be built. They had access to the blueprints. They could put an outline of it there, but they probably didn't know just exactly where it was going to go, other than a general idea, and they just happened to have missed by 50 yards or so. So anyway, there is the outline of the new high school in 1914. And in 1923, there's an addition that was put on to the high school. Now, there's a little problem with that, because if you notice right there, well, let's flip it so you can read it. It says built in 1922. My guess is, analyzing Gothics and stuff, without ever really delving into it deeply to come up with the right answer, that the building was being worked on and built in 1922, but the first classes went there in 1923. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I include this just to show you how you can't trust architects' drawings anytime, historically, because they're just often wrong, because he hadn't really got a final plan yet. That was the architect's drawing of the addition to the school, and yet it would take too long here to discuss how wrong that is. And to review a little bit and anticipate, we had the seminary building built in 1855, the high school in 1914, and the addition in 1923, and we're going to come later to the gymnasium, which is built in 1926. That unlabeled building over there along the railroad is the power plant for the whole thing. And there's a picture of the brand new school in 1915 looking southwest. And notice there's a fire plug there, so we know for sure we've got city water at that point, and probably have had for many years before that, but I don't know. And there's another picture. And notice the eastern face, what we can see to the left of that picture, there's no addition to it. It's not all that long down Walnut Street, which looks kind of muddy there in the lower left. Now, I just have to throw in, back to my limestone pitching, Bedford had built their new high school in 1912, and they built it out of limestone. Bloomington builds a new high school in 1914. They built it out of brick. Now, they may have been wanting to match the old seminary building. It was brick. The original IU buildings, both on seminary area, they were brick. But the new buildings out at Dunn Meadow, they were in brick too. But it just shows you that Lawrence County and Bedford were more important to the limestone industry and its business in the turn of the century than was Bloomington and Monroe County. Here we are looking across two-way traffic. Walnut was not one way in 1923. At the new addition on the south side of the school, and that line shows the demarcation area between the original building and the addition. Now, one of the things that surprised me most in doing the research for this program was wondering what on earth that cancerous growth is doing on the south face of the high school. Well, it turns out it's a conservatory or a greenhouse, and it was there originally when the addition was built. It was not on it was on the 1949 aerial view, but it was not there in 1955. So at some point, just prior to 1955, it was removed. But you see from several pictures that greenhouse was no doubt attached to the room where they taught biology or horticulture. I dare say, given all the high humidity in a greenhouse and a wood structure, probably by the early 50s, it was just growing unsafe and had to remove it from the building. That picture is there because it's just a lovely picture. You can see the greenhouse to the left, but it illustrates the problem in trying to get good pictures from old Gothics. Yearbook writers, I dare say, across the land, all can muck up a really nice picture with some words in a banner that goes across the picture. I've eliminated those words, but you get the point. There would have been the extent of the original building and the new addition on the left. Now, notice this is the seminary building and the original high school before the addition, and I want you to get that camera angle. We're going to be looking at the south face, a rare picture of the south face of the original building. And notice the greenhouse was on the original high school, the 1914 high school. And a picture of it shows up in a Gothic in 1916. And in the 1964 Gothic, it was gone, but you can see the footprint where it had originally been supported in those recessed areas in the brick. So, if you'll recall, when last we saw this, it was all of the buildings in the original IU campus. Well, then in 1922, apparently getting ready for the installation of the monument to the first building and all the celebrations that would occur there, they appeared to give a better effort at locating just exactly where those original buildings were, because that looks like more thought went into it than the schematic. The important thing for you to see is building number 1, seminary building, erected 1824, the first building at IU. Now, I've taken that drawing and superimposed it on the 1949 aerial view, so that building number 1, you see it to the left, the red number 1, that's the site of the original building, and you see there it is in the shrubbery with the corner of the football field, which is why the bulldozers had come in and excavated the dirt away up to that monument. And the red star just north of the high school building and the seminary, that's roughly where that monument is today. That plaque that doesn't bother to tell you that that's not really the location of the original building, even though it says it is. Everybody get that? Okay. We're going way back in these pictures for the original high school. We haven't even added the seats to the auditorium yet. That's the 1915 Gothic, first Gothic of the new school. Now here's 1948, those wooden seats, and by 1964, when we graduated, some of us, we can remember some of those wooden seats that were falling apart here and there. And here we have a 1915 photo of the original gymnasium. Now this is the basketball gym where we worked out and played games and went and won the state title in 1919. However, the big games weren't played here. They were played at IU on their gymnasium because this gymnasium simply would not accommodate the crowds that would have formed. And notice the I-beams at the top of that. That's holding up the auditorium. When the other gymnasium was built, this became the girls' gym and was a place where after Friday night after game dances were held. Here we have a 1943 picture in the library, and this begins a brief little topic on how things change. And I can't emphasize how what we remember is not necessarily what had always been, even though our memories are quite accurate. I don't remember the library looking quite like that, the south side of the big room. Maybe it did, but I certainly don't remember all those busts of great figures in history. There's a picture of the chemistry room in 1943. That didn't change any to when we were there. Up until 59, didn't change. But look at these pictures in 1928 of the chemistry facilities. Nothing like that. Clearly it's been ripped out and a whole new chemistry room added. Probably more chemistry at the top. Down at the bottom is the print shop. More old pictures from 1928. But then, that probably never changed a bit. The specific room is not identified. And some things never change. If you put a cash register on the far right-hand side of the cafeteria, the L shape there, that didn't change a bit. Although I don't know if the furniture, tables and chairs may have changed. I don't know. But it didn't change. The bookstores never change. And I just found this interesting because it's the graduating class, Monroe County Public Schools, 1924. I just added it up, and there were 64 males and 87 females in the picture, for what it's worth. Now, this 1914, 15 era picture, we're on what we remember is the third floor, and we're looking east. And that wide open area where the sun's coming through in the middle of the left side of the hall is that huge opening where you enter the front door of the school and walked up this grand wide staircase, went through that, and you're on the third floor. If you turned left and went into that picture down the hall, the administrative offices would be to your left, and those doors at the very end would open up into a little hallway where the deans had their offices and such as that. So, what intrigued me here is, in that booklet, that was labeled corridor on the second floor, which tells me that before the addition, they always considered that the second floor, or after the addition, we considered it the third floor, which means they probably had to change all the numbers on the rooms. Because the original 1914 building did have 4 floors, but not that much was on the 4 floors. They probably just called that the basement. Now the cameraman has walked all the way down to the other end, and he's looking west on the 3rd floor. And those doors that you see there along the corridor to the left would have been entering into the auditorium. In 1924, 1942, now here we are playing football, but it's not the football field officially yet. But you can see where they have excavated away all the dirt leading up to that original IU building monument up there. IU played its football games up till when we finally had an official, well-constructed football field in 1931. We played all our games up until then at Jordan Field at IU. And there it is, configured for a baseball game, but we played football games and some baseball games there as well. But to the right is the IU Memorial Union building and the original power plant facility. And here we are in 1932 celebrating, no doubt, our brand new football field. Notice the building in the middle, the small building with the peak roof, and then on the west side, a lean-to affair. It's right there back on the schematic of the whole thing. Well, here we are in 1921, looking west at our muddy land that's not yet a football field, and there is that building. We are seeing the east front of what we see in that other picture. The laundry facilities was there at one point. The print shop had been there at one point. And there you see down at the bottom how eventually that lean-to affair was expanded and we had two identical peak roof parts of it. Now we're back playing football in 1932 on our new field. And after extensive research, I can feel completely assured in telling you there were no face mask penalties called that day. Now we're looking across Walnut Street at that white building, which was going to be the location of WTTV Channel 4 that we all remember, the TV station in Bloomington. Well, here it is in the 1928 Gothic, with having nothing to do with television yet. And this 1947 Sanborn map labeled it as a radio factory. It first went on the air in 1949 in its TV station, and it became Channel 10, and then in 1954 it became Channel 4. And in this 1948 Gothic, it doesn't have a label on the building, but if you look at the upper left corner, you see they're building what will be the antenna for the TV station. And there in the 1964 Gothic, you see now is the Radio Television Center. Now this is one of my favorite pictures in this whole thing, as reasons that you'll see. These people are going in the western door of the high school, which would have taken them in on the second floor. And I have a thing about sidewalks. That's the door they're going into or coming out of. You see that sidewalk leading up to the seminary building? I would love to tell you that that's the same sidewalk that you go up to the higher level today in Seminary Park. But I can assure you it is not. Certainly, I've analyzed old photographs, and the number of risers and their locations have changed over the years, so clearly it's not the same sidewalk. But is it in the same location exactly? I'm pretty sure it probably is, but I can't guarantee you that. But the main way you got up to the seminary building is either through that stairway or the one that went up right alongside the building. So, to review where these sidewalk pictures are, now the second thing that photograph cries out for an answer, what are those two white structures in the back that look like a Star Wars critter lumbering across the football field? Those are the press boxes. And I don't know why we had two press boxes, unless the first one wasn't big enough, so they just, instead of tearing it down and building a bigger one, built a second one. And from the looks of the paint, probably the bigger of the two, the taller of the one was the second one. Don't know that, just my guess. And the third thing about that picture is, what the hell is that house doing on the football field? Well, it's not on the football field. It's along First Street. The football field was there when that picture was taken, and here we have in 1949, it shows you, before I jump to the next picture, I do want to put this in there because I've never mentioned where the tennis courts were, except for on this slide. And they're up on the west side of the gymnasium. So now that everybody knows where the tennis courts are, I'm going to zoom in and show you First Street in the middle there, football field to the north on the top, and look, there's houses along the south side of First Street in 1949. Well, sometime very shortly after, the houses were removed and a baseball field was built. Now, one of the things that surprised me is going through the Gothics, finding out that while football and basketball were played all the time, every year we had teams throughout the history of the school, baseball was not necessarily so. We had some early teams, and then long periods where no baseball team. And then In the late 40s, we started playing baseball and continued then on. So certainly at some point in the 50s, we had a baseball field. The school corporation, no doubt, bought the land, and we installed a baseball field. And we've done away with those houses and now have a parking lot. And by 1967, if you look at down at the bottom, the parking lot has expanded. Now that picture, to me, has absolutely no redeeming features whatsoever. That's the kind of picture that you take and you wouldn't really be very proud of it. It's just a picture. But we all love then and now pictures. At least I certainly do. And I can't help but believe the photographer was trying to get, in 1965, a now picture that duplicated that picture taken in 1924 with Professor Woodburn making a speech and the ubiquitous President Bryan. He was on the dais. But no doubt this was part of the ceremony in installing that historical marker that we talked about. And that wood, the boards on the ground, they were outlining the floor plan of that original IU first building. But it does look to me like our photographer was trying the best he could with the lens and where it could stand to get a then and now picture of that old picture. In which case, good for him. Now here's a picture of the south side of the seminary building from the 1941 Gothic that shows there was no parking lot south of the seminary building that we remember. Now there's the seminary building with its bay window and bell tower. That's the way it was in 1965. And inside the seminary building, something you don't see anymore, wooden mock-ups for driver training class. We all remember driver training class. And what you haven't seen in a long time, if you look in the upper right, a loose gravel sign. Remember when most of the roads in the county were gravel? Well, just in front of the seminary building where they had the circle, it's where the school buses did their thing. And then in 1965, they tore down the seminary building. Now we're going to go over to the vocational school buildings. And if it's one thing I don't want to hear from anybody is that, no, we didn't use it for that. I remember it being used for something else. It changed the uses of these buildings from year to year. Here we have the power plant, which of course was the first building along Railroad Street. And here we have an old picture of the 1916 Gothic on the left, the 1920 Gothic on the right. And I can't help but believe we're actually working on and expanding the power plant. Don't know that, but I assume since the addition came along in 23, 24, we may very well realize we need a bigger power plant. And the gymnasium is going to be built in 26, so it looks to me like we're working on it, probably expanding it. The next building was the Stone Vocational School building, there where the old professor's house would be, in the far southwest corner. Actually, the vocational students in the Limestone Vocational School built that building themselves. And it was finished roughly about 1930. And there we see the west side of it, looking southwest at the whole shooting match. The east side of the building, after this extraordinary ugly addition had been put onto it that you just see the corner of on the right, there. Oh, how that grates to see that concrete block building heading on to a lovely old limestone building. And there's the south First Street side of the Stone Vocational Building. But times changed. The jobs weren't available in the stone industry, so part of our, if not all, of that building was converted to a machine shop training and woodworking. Then the agricultural building. We saw that earlier. That shows up in the 1952 Gothic, but does not appear in the 1949 aerial view, so that pinpoints that pretty closely. And later, auto mechanics and drafting facilities would be in that building. And here, I recommend to you all, when you go to the History Center, find the huge aerial 1955 aerial photograph of the city of Bloomington. And the high school shows up very nicely in it. It covers an entire wall in there, in the museum. And you see that that building it appears in 1967, but it's not there in 1955. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the building trades vocational school. So, to review, the agriculture, power plant, building trades, and the stone, mechanical, woodworking vocational along the railroad tracks. Then, after the high school moved south of town, you don't need vocational schools associated with junior highs. The vocation schools went with the high school south of town. And this shows up here, how they're being used in the 1965 Central Junior High School yearbook. And those four buildings, they were shown up in later, we'll see. But such things as music, library, band, the boiler building, of course, classroom, shop building. Now they're used for junior high stuff. Now, to back up a little, in 1932, this is the north side of the gymnasium, which had been built in 1926. And at the dedication game that year, Bedford won 29-22, so there. And my favorite picture of the gymnasium, when you could get a parking place sometime on 2nd Street, right out in front of the gym. And of course, that became the gymnasium for the Central Junior High after the high school moved south of town. Now, all you people that went to all those basketball games and had such pleasant memories of the sports going on and that thing, I look at that picture and all I can think of is gym class. And none of my memories are good. Well, in 1975, the gymnasium came down. And here we have the best, in terms of sharpest quality, aerial view of the campus in 1949. And that shows you a Google Earth image alongside to where I've given it my best shot to show the yellow is where that plaque is today and the red is where it was originally. So the next time you go in the Kroger store, as you're going in the front door of the Kroger's, think, I'm here right within a matter of feet of the original building of Indiana University. And there are these four aerial views that we have in the archives. There's the lower right by 72, notice the high school is gone and the post office has bought land there. We'll get to that in a minute. This is what the high school looks like on that 1955 aerial picture in the museum that you need to all visit. Now, Well House on IU has as its facade there the pointy thing. IU stole that from us, those Indian givers, best I can tell. There's probably a better reason than that. But remember, the high school corporation bought the old seminary building from IU. Okay. Then, that was in 1897. Then in 1908, they come and say, well, we want our stone portal. Well, somehow that happened. So that portal that you see in the picture in the upper left is now the same one as part of the well house in the lower left. Everybody see that? And they rebuilt the portal into the seminary building so it looks like it does in the upper right after that. Now, you saw this picture before, and notice, though, the sundial. There's no excuse for being late to class because there's a clock right out in front of the school. Well, in 1896, while IU still owned it, so that's fair and square, they took the sundial and moved it to the Dunwoods campus, and now you can visit that sundial right next to Maxwell Hall today. Now, this is important for some people, and they have every right for it to be important to them. The Bloomington High School last class downtown was in 1965. The BHS first class in its location south of town was in 1966, but it was still Bloomington High School. It wasn't south. It was Bloomington High School, period. Then, with the construction of the second high school, Bloomington High School became Bloomington High School South in the fall of 1972, and the first graduating class south was in 73. So there are those people who have every right to be proud of graduating or attending Bloomington High School, but it wasn't south, and it wasn't the old brick building. So, when they moved Bloomington High School to the new building south of town, the old high school building was renovated and it became Central Junior High. And then, on April 6, 1967, some little son of a bitch set fire to it. Now, when that happened, obviously the students that were going to Central Junior High had no place to go to school. So the gymnasium was partitioned off into temporary classrooms. That's inside the gymnasium. Those pictures are from the Bulldog, which should be in italics, but the Bulldog was the yearbook for the Bloomington Central Junior High. And these two temporary buildings, flat roof buildings, were built just south of the gymnasium, along with their use of those former vocational buildings. And this picture shows looking northwest at the gymnasium and those two temporary flat roof classroom and administration buildings for the temporary junior high. Just west of those, you can see, is that old agricultural building. And by that time, the Bowman Stone Mill was gone. And this 1972 aerial view shows those two temporary buildings, and they're selling off land already. They've made inroads into the football field, and certainly the post office has built their building. Now, we all remember the picture of the winged victory of Samothrace, which the class of 1922 gave the school that sat on the third floor, right at the top of the stairs, the main entrance, right in front of the trophy case. And there we see, if you couldn't see it before, it says class of 1922. Well, Bloomington High School South had an addition put on it in 1998. And you go in the front door, go up those steps, and by golly, if you look in the distance, kudos to the principal, James Rose, who wanted to include that statue. You know, the old one was burned and destroyed, but this one was newly purchased, and he wanted to put that there as to show the continuity in history between the old Bloomington High School and Bloomington High School South, and it's a wonderful touch, and it's just beautiful. But among all that, and we didn't go through it because it just gives the history of the Greek statue, and it was all Greek to me. But here we have notice that it was donated by the class of 1926, which just shows you we're back where we started. This talk has gone full circle, starting and ending with historical information that at the best is confusing and at the worst is just flat out wrong. But you know, if the whole story is substantially accurate, what difference does it make, a couple of years here and there, if the story is worth telling? And I think the history of the campus of the Bloomington High School is definitely a story worth telling.
You don't play? As somebody who played football at VHS, I can verify that the field looked just about like you see there. We had grass for about a week. And then the whole rest of the time it was a muddy dirt, black line.
Yes. I want to point out, Clay, that you showed the two photos taken from the roof of Wiley House. One looking to the northwest toward the central school, the other one to the southwest. Well, the thinker in your other photograph, that's Theophilus Wiley sitting in that photograph. But I think the reason they submitted that album was they were requested to submit an album to the. But it was controversial. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they were asked to submit an album of music.
I found out, just now I found out, the Theophilus
Wiley, who took the pictures from the top of the Wiley House, he was the thinker in that picture of the physics department. So Professor Wiley was in memoriam. Yes, sir. Sir.
You said that the well house portal is the same one.
Yes.
Was there a reproduction or the actual?
No, that's it. They came in and carted it away.
Right.
Yes.
There were two of those. There was, if you look at the, well, in this picture here, you clearly see the one just off to the right. But there's another one on the same side of this building to the left of the center. There were two of them. So both of those original portals are the portals you walk through to get into the well house today. And then they were simply replaced with one that said Bloomington High School.
Any other questions, observations? Sir?
The original statue, did it collapse?
Well, it was just destroyed. It was destroyed in the fire. It's gone. It's hundreds of pieces. And Mike and I have always wondered where the original
Statue came from. Was it, I'm not even 100% sure it was limestone, but did it come from a mill, out of the local sculptor's studio? Was it imported from out of town? We looked through all the local newspapers. We looked through all the old Gothics. We looked through all the old Optimists, which were the high school newspaper. We never found anything, which led us to believe, one, the pertinent Optimist or newspaper account has been stolen. That happens sometimes in historical record. Or what, in my opinion, is more likely, this was just another statue in an era where sculptors and stone mills were cranking out statues all over. They go into cemeteries, other places. There was nothing significant about this statue over on the left. It's just a possibility. We'd love to know who sculpted it.
Pictures of Front Hall, Asplen Central Road, and the statue is still intact.
What did you say now? You say the statue is still intact?
It was in Front Hall.
Was when?
Right
After the fire?
during right after the fire.
There are other people who have seen it at the landfill destroyed in pieces, so.
That's the problem with the historian, coming up with answers like that. Any other questions? Sir, in the very back.
I was wondering who would be the oldest class, VHS class member that's here today? Well, we know 64s here, we're all over the place. But who was here in the 50s or the 40s? Oh, I saw one go up and right down.
54.
50.
We have a 49, class in 49. Okay, I think that's the winner. Brad, did you have something?
Yeah, the other photograph you showed of the people standing around the marker in the old costumes.
Yeah, yes.
Those are all Andrew and Theophilus Wiley descendants in that photograph.
Ah, all right. You remember the picture that showed all the people, some in period costumes,
Standing around the monument in 1929, I think. Those were all relatives of Theophilus Wiley. And Andrew Wiley. So, yeah.
right. Nothing that I remember. Nothing that shows up on the Sanborn maps. But
It's like a lot of buildings at that time. It was a way to give light and ventilation to the buildings around the open area. Anything else? Down here. What? Yes.
Why was that?
Because the gymnasium was torn down because they want to extend college.
Was there opposition to that in the community because of the historical nature of that gym?
I don't know, but I guess there was. Does anybody know? He wants to know if they tore down the gymnasium in 1975, was there much opposition to that in the community because of the historical significance of the gymnasium? He's remembering not much.
My dad tore it down.
Yeah, Steve Funkhauser's father tore it down. So, so there may not have been any opposition to speak of. Is that it? Okay. It's a fundraiser. Okay. So, thank you very much, folks. That's it.